Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Chinese investors have made 2 bids in as many weeks for gold and platinum mines in South Africa. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer is here to tell us more about Chinese interest in South African assets. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Is Chinese investment in South African mining companies common?
You know, not so much in South Africa. In Africa, it's very common because they're in virtually 52 African countries, and they deal a lot in reciprocity. They will build a lot of infrastructure for countries, which makes it very attractive. They come with investor funds, but also with reciprocity. In South Africa, we've seen them in chrome for some time. They've been in chrome, but this late entry into gold and platinum is interesting. The one with the platinum is sort of closer to consummation. You know, Wisizwe was troubled. It was hurt by the financial meltdown. It had a funding issue. It's also got community issues where the community are shareholders and a lot of them have split, and so there is fractional activity there. But along have come the Chinese and really offering something like 7 billion in all, because we can't just look at what they're offering for the shares. And the unfortunate part of that, I think it's about 1.7 billion they want to offer for the shares. It gives them control. So the South Africans will lose control. It goes to 51%. But the big thing is that they come in with a lot of project finance. So, you know, that project that's been waiting to be developed for so long and that can be good for South Africa to develop and will create jobs and will help the community, they're prepared to fund that, and that will be a very important thing. On the gold side, you know, Aurora has been a stressed asset for some time. Well, the assets that Aurora holds have been stressed. They were part of the Pomodzi legacy where there was liquidation, and Aurora, this emerging black-owned company, has been seriously troubled with underfunding in the purchase of Grootvlei in Springs and also Orkney and Klerksdorp. And it reached a head last week when Anglo Gold Ashanti decided to cease supplying services, and that's, you know, water services, energy services, compressed air services to the Orkney mine. And in looking at that situation, it emerged that there is a Chinese bidder in the wings, and a fairly substantial one from Hong Kong, listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But the liquidator saying, show me the money, because he's had so many funding issues, and at the moment he's still sticking to the Aurora bid, which was put in last year, but the deal hasn't really been consummated because of lack of funds. But he says they are sticking to the timetable. So for this point in time, he's sticking to Aurora's attempt to take over those 2 assets, Springs and Klerksdorp. But I think it's also interesting to them that the Chinese are very keen on getting in on this act as well.
What sort of commodities are we looking at? You've mentioned gold and platinum. Are there any others?
Well, early investments were in chrome and ferrochrome with the Chinese. The Chinese are big producers of stainless steel, and that is the basic ingredient. And that took place, I think, 12 years ago when they came in and invested in the Limpopo province in chrome, which they convert some of to ferrochrome with an off-take agreement to go into China. But the CAD fund, this China Development Fund, has been looking around at potential assets for some time in South Africa, but they seem to take quite a lot of time in their due diligence studies of various assets, and sometimes by the time they enter with a bid, the assets have already been taken up by others.
Now, you've mentioned that Aurora and Wisizwe have been targets of Chinese investment. Are there any others that look like they could be in the pipeline?
Not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay, so it's just the 2 of those. Can you tell us a bit more about Wisizwe?
Yeah, Wisizwe is a very interesting platinum company. It's a junior company. It's got a very promising asset in Northwest province, and it would have probably have built half the mine already had we not had that meltdown. It hit it very, very hard at quite a vulnerable time, you know, when you're needing funding. And the CEO then set his cap for a Chinese investment, and he succeeded in interesting the Chinese. And of course, platinum is a fantastic metal. You know, I'm sure a lot of people want to get their hands on it, even non-Chinese people, but the Chinese particularly are also very keen on platinum because of its use in the automotive industry and also in jewelry.
Now, what sort of value are we looking at for all these investments?
Well, you know, that's one thing about the Chinese. They seem to go for stressed assets, so they don't need to pay too much, and they're looking for bargains. And so on the precious metals front, they have seen the problems that Ryhove has. And unfortunately for Ryhove, that also coincided with a dramatic drop in its share price. So, of course, that makes it far cheaper for the Chinese to acquire. And we can see they're offering about 1.7 billion rand for the actual control of the company. Translated into dollars, I think it's over $220, somewhere around there, $220 million. And then on the gold side, well, they're getting it at bargain basement price. It seems, well, they might top the Aurora bid, which was just over 600 million rand, that is. They seem to be prepared to pay a little bit more for Orkney, but are going to match what was offered for Grootvlei, where there are water problems. So I think they are getting some bargains. They're not having to fork out too much money, because you can imagine this CAD fund, this development fund from China, must have access to, you know, billions of dollars. But you can see they turn over their money many times before they spend, and they also look long. So they're quite shrewd investors.
Would this then have BEE implications if they had controlling shares?
Well, they've got to follow the BEE model just like everyone else. Okay. And there is already, with Ryhove, it's a company which has the community embedded in it. So that is got a BEE credential already. The only problem with that BEE credential is that it's been split. And there's fighting amongst the communities and court cases. And some of the share value has been collateralized. And people are looking to find where that money is. So they take the shares that they had and they borrow funds against that. And so people say there's shops opening in Santa and everything that from those funds. So it's quite a curious paper trail people are having to go through. And that is stemming from this fight within the community. It's quite regrettable because, I mean, this community is dealing with a national patrimony. They should be excited about the development of the mine, a near mine community. I don't think they should be rushing off with the funds into investments other than mining at this stage. So I think it needs to be carefully looked at. There's also an involvement of the Industrial Development Corporation. They seem to be involved in this collateralized. That's a state-owned entity. I think they must watch out what they're doing, because this could backfire on them.
Thank you so much for your insight, Martin.
That's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.